Prislovic keeps it alive. Oh, Crawford, the fancy footwork and a fabulous finish. JackJumpers chance. McVeigh, 2 on the clock. Oh! McVeigh! And have a look at what it means to Scott Roth. Bloody good. How good. These JackJumpers. They just never say die.
G'day and welcome to the Tasmanian Takeover, the Tasmanian basketball fan podcast for the Basketball Fix. Head over to thebasketballfix.com for all your up-to-date NBL news. You can also get them on their socials at the Basketball Fix on all platforms. My name is Jared J.D. Duggan, and I am not joined by Clint Birdo Burtonshaw this week. I am, in fact, joined by a very special guest. I'm very excited about this one. Former Hobart Tassie Devil, Brisbane Bullet, Adelaide Thirty-Sixer, current ABC expert commentator and co-owner of Swisher Hoops Academy, Tasmanian basketball legend, Mark Nash. Thanks for joining, Mark.
Oh, great to join you, Jared. Really pleased to be on the podcast and talking all things Tasmanian hoops. It's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Let's go. If it's all right with you, I'd like to start at the start. You're a Kingston High School boy like myself. Tell us a bit about how basketball came into your life and when you realised that you could make a career out of this.
Yeah, well, that was back in the 90s when basketball was huge. Both in the NBL, it was really flourishing, but particularly with the NBA, and it was the Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan era. And I wasn't a basketballer. I played traditional sports. I opened the bowling for Kingston High cricket team. Played with the Kingston Tigers footy team for a little bit, but tennis was probably my main sport and a bit of middle distance running. But a lot of my mates were really heavily involved with basketball, and there was a couple of hoops outside the old Kingston High gym, and just used to find ourselves there at recess and lunchtime, and I knew nothing about the game. But I do remember some of my classmates saying, I'm Grace, you're Rucker, and they were talking about, of course, Ricky Grace and Derek Rucker, two now icons of the game in Australia. Yep. And I had no idea who these guys were, but from there, that sort of recess and lunchtime intro into the game, then joined a team up at Kingborough Sports Centre, and things went from there into rep basketball, state basketball, and then straight out of year 12 had the opportunity to join the Tassie Devils. So it was quite a whirlwind for me, and I think being 6'6" in Tasmanian basketball is pretty tall, so got some opportunities, and it's hard to believe that's all 30 plus years ago now.
Yeah, for sure. You were I watched a couple of your games on YouTube last weekend, and you were pretty handy, might I say. You were more of a defensive forward, I noticed, but you had this uncanny vision. I noticed that you weren't the guy that brought the ball the length of the court, but quite often it would go to you, and you'd be the guy handing it to the person who would take the shot. How would you describe your playing style?
Yeah, I think you probably nailed it there in a lot of ways. I was a bit of a jack of all trades on the court. My natural position, if you looked at it, was probably a small forward when you get to the NBL level, and you look at particularly players now, but spent quite a bit of time in the power forward spot and even in the centre position just with injuries. But I guess my strengths were a bit of pick and pop, because I wasn't big enough to go down and bang with the real big blokes. And so I developed a pretty consistent three-point shot. I could rebound well from my size and like to kind of start the fast break. And I think really found my feet with the Adelaide Thirty-Sixers, when we sort of had the championship run as well, where I did actually have to walk the ball up in the grand final series a couple of times because there was so much pressure on our backcourt because they were just elite. So just remember Phil Smythe, my coach, looking over and saying, Nash, you're going to have to carry it for us, because my defender wasn't as up and in. So look, amazing memory. So I think it was a bit of that glue guy. Quite often I'd have the defensive assignments almost from 1 through 5, and I loved that challenge. I was never a real go-to scorer. I had some decent scoring games, but it was really a glue guy. And I look back and think, well, could I have perhaps been more of a contributor at the offensive end? And possibly I could have, but looking back, was really happy with 13 years in the NBL, and some terrific memories, starting here with the Devils, as you mentioned, a stop in Brisbane, and then 7 years to finish off with the Adelaide 36ers, who are one of the biggest brands in Aussie hoops.
Absolutely. Was that a role you'd played before in that grand final series, or was the coach just like, "Here's the keys, Mark, off you, you work
Yeah,
it
well,
out"?
it was. I'd perhaps, at the defensive end, I'd picked up point guards a bit where we'd switched on D, and Damon Lowry was one particularly who is now a pretty big name in commentary around the country, and I used to frustrate guys like that a little bit because I was a bit taller and I'd kind of be trying to be physical with them. But at the offensive end, no, I'd tend to just to almost run away from the ball and do my work off the ball. But yeah, in that final series, I had Brett Maher, who's one of the legends of the game, and particularly in Adelaide, the court's now named after him, and an import called Willie Farley. And those two guys were just getting smothered full court. So it was just a strategy to take a bit of heat off those guys, get them off the ball early. And literally my job was to walk the ball over half court, first pass in the half court, and then we're into our half court offense. So I certainly wouldn't call myself a point guard, but in that situation, I got thrown the ball, and thankfully the West Sydney Razorbacks who we played against didn't pick on me too much, bringing it up the court.
They just let you run with it.
That's it. If this guy's got it, we're in good hands. We're not going to worry about him.
Tell us a bit about the Devils. I'm just old enough to remember the Devils. I had a green and red basketball that I used to play in the backyard with. I don't really remember any names or players. But if we could compare them to the JackJumpers of today, back then, give us an idea of the impact it had on the community.
Yeah, look, it was incredible, especially for me being a player who grew up in Hobart. I was born in Launceston, but from 6 years of age, grew up in Hobart, and that was where I started my hoops journey, and played in the same arena. So Derwent Entertainment Centre was great in its time. It didn't have all the big jumbotron and the amazing sound system that it's got now, but when it was packed, it was still incredibly loud as a venue. And I think that probably the main difference between the Devils and the JackJumpers is budget. And the JackJumpers have one of the biggest payrolls in the league. They're very well resourced in that space, where the Devils was by far and away the lowest budget. So we were young, a little bit like the Cairns Taipans are now, where you're trying to bring in young talent. And my first year, I was a development player, and the team won 2 games. I only suited up for 1 game that year, so 2 games first year. Then sort of cracked the main roster in 95, and we won 4 games. So we doubled it, and then in 1996 we won 8 games. So it was really good, strong growth, and you never know in sport if that would continue. But we had a group that was still only in our early 20s, with a couple of very good imports at the time as well. So you can often wonder what would have happened if that squad had been able to stay together. Darren Smith, who's now the chief operating officer at the JackJumpers, was part of that program. A guy called Tim Brenton, who was a 6'7" shooter. Mm-hmm. But the key Aussie guy was David Stiff, who went on to win 6 NBL championships with Adelaide 36ers, Sydney Kings. I think it may have been the Melbourne Tigers to finish up with. So, a number of us were able to go on and have success in other programs, but it was, great memories. Bill Tomlinson was the coach, and he's still now kicking around with the Sydney Kings as Brian Gorgin's assistant. So it's amazing. And I still get, people coming up to me now, whether it's at a JackJumpers game or just down the street occasionally, where they say, look, we used to go to every game with the Devils. A bit like yourself, Jared, might be a story of, I've still got that rubber basketball with the Devils, logo on it, or my work with Swisher now, occasionally someone will come up to our front desk and say, look, I found this old poster. It's been in the garage for 30 years, but we'd love you guys to have it. So terrific memories. And that's really all part of the history, and, part of the history of the JackJumpers. I'm part of their Bloodlines group as well. So got really strong history in Tasmania, the work the Hobart Chargers do and the other NBL 1 programs. And of course, state teams going away and, doing well at the national level. So a lot of really proud basketball history down this way.
Yeah, for sure. And tell me about that final year. How at what point in the season were you informed that there wouldn't be a 1997? And was that during the season, or was it after the season that you had to sort of process all that?
Yeah, it was actually during the season, which is pretty difficult. And I was only 20 at the time, so you sort of have a limited ability to even process what that means. But at the time, the way I understand it is the league had been promised, if they were able to shrink back to, say, 8 or 10 teams, there'd be a big broadcast deal. It was almost going to be like a bit of a basketball super league. So the Geelong Supercats and the Gold Coast Rollers were actually paid a substantial amount to hand their license back, I believe. And my understanding with the Devils was they were late with some payments, and we're probably talking 50 grand. So in today's dollars, it's not huge when you're talking about multi-million-dollar budgets, but back then that was pretty big coin, and for a club that was very low on resources. So the club, my understanding, had defaulted on a payment. So the league says, we're actually going to take your license back because you're behind with your payments. So we're all informed that the club wasn't going to be part of 97. I'd say there would have been a handful of games to a third of the games left in the season. So it certainly created a lot of emotion. The last few games at the deck were totally packed out. There was a lot of community outpouring. I've seen some footage recently of all the signs in the crowd of we'll be back, or that we can't lose this. And the narrative at the time was, okay, the club won't be there in 97, but there'll be some work, try and re-enter in 1998. And that's where the Hobart Chargers sort of sprung out of the demise of the Devils. There was a program called the Hobart Hornets playing in what is now NBL 1. So those programs sort of came together, and then the Chargers came in, and the plan was that, do a year of that, and then hopefully there's an NBL license. But 25 years later, there wasn't. But thankfully now we have the JackJumpers, and it's been amazing just to see the way they've embraced the state and the passion for NBL basketball. And I see jerseys everywhere, and people that come into Swisher are talking about Chris Golding or Bryce Cotton. So players across the league are now household names, which is awesome, because even in the 90s boom of basketball, it still wasn't at that level. And I think, with social media and there's podcasts like this one, there's a lot of visibility on the league, a lot of ears on the league, and it's terrific for basketball, in my opinion, at all levels.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a shame that there wasn't the communication wasn't as easy as it is today. Because I can imagine the upswell of the almost the what's the word, the distress of losing a team. It was almost the start of a long 20 years of Tasmanian getting snubbed for professional sport. Yep. Look, let's move on. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your role at the Chargers. We had a chat with Sam Armstrong from the Northwest Thunder last week. And he was raving about the rivalry between the Thunder awesome. And the Chargers and the game coming up on the 29th. Tell us a bit about your role and your history with the Chargers and how you're looking for this year.
Yeah, well, my current role is director of the club, so on the board of management, and my portfolio is around basketball operations. So the teams I'm involved with, recruitment of players, and this weekend we've got our first recruit coming into town. So actually working to get the apartment ready, and we work closely with the JackJumpers. So we now sort of share accommodation over a 12-month period, which is terrific. So basketball operations, and my background with the club is multi-level, I guess. So I guess I grew up watching the old Hornets at Kingston Sports Centre, and then I had the opportunity to play for the Chargers. Came back to Tassie and finished off my playing journey, playing for 5 or so years after finishing in with the 36ers, and then had 2 years coaching the women's team, which were two of my most enjoyable years I've had in basketball, full stop. Just terrific group of players. We won the old Siebel South Conference Championship in Bendigo, so it was amazing. Then I had some time on the board, came back and coached again during the COVID period. It wasn't so successful, and now on the board. So the club's been a big part of my life, I guess. My kids have grown up watching the Chargers. Both my older 2 kids have been in the program as development players over the last couple of years in varying forms. So look, it's given me a lot of joy, and now I guess I'm a facilitator at the club of working with the board, and we've got a terrific board in place trying to trying to really set the club up for the future and essentially be that club for Southern Tasmania. All of our associations are proud of, that players want to play for, that local coaches can have aspirations to coach. And it's terrific. And you mentioned the rivalries. There's some great rivalries, but none better than the Northwest Thunder with the men and the Launceston Tornadoes for the women. So round one is that rivalry round. Our guys are heading up to Ulverston and our women's team are going to Launceston. It's a little rough having them in separate venues. It would be nice to be all together. But, terrific rivalry. Got a lot of respect for Sam Armstrong. I would have loved to be able to play with him more. We had one season together with the Chargers when he made the switch from the Thunder. But, look, he's got a lot of passion. We know that Thunder team's going to be raring to go. But our Chargers guys are led by Jared Weeks now. We're super excited having Weeksy on board coaching. And, there's going to be fireworks up on the Northwest Coast in round one, I can tell you.
For sure, I definitely want to talk about Weeksy. But first of all, I'm sort of interested in with the JackJumpers coming on board. Has the level of support sort of flowed down into the second tier? Have you seen an increase in crowd numbers and participation in the NBL 1 season as a result?
Well, it's been really interesting. We have a terrific relationship with the JackJumpers, and we're working closely with them on a number of levels. And the first one this year was having Weeksy coaching. We'd love to have JackJumpers playing in our programs over coming years, and we're working on that now to look ahead for next season. But to answer the question around the crowd numbers, our crowds have actually dropped, which has been disappointing. Hobart traditionally, in the old SEABL days, always had the biggest crowds in the league. It was great. But that was before live streaming, and I just wonder the impact on the live stream. If it's June or July in Hobart, it's about -5 degrees with the wind chill factor, and people can sit at home and watch a really good quality live stream. So we're having some challenges getting bums on seats. But for this season, we're really looking to engage with the local basketball community to say, look, come along and watch homegrown talent playing on the court. And we've had a big focus. Our women's team particularly is filled with local players. We've brought Shana Thompson back, who's been playing in the mainland the last couple of years. Ellie Collins has been working in Hobart and crazily commuting up to Mackay to play in NBL 1 North. So we made it a priority to bring those players back to the Chargers. Taylor Roberts has come back after a couple of years off, focusing on her professional career. So we're really pleased. The women's program is going to have a very Hobart feel to it. The guys as well, we're bringing in 2 recruits. They're Aussie guys from New South Wales who Weeksy's handpicked, who he feels will complement guys like Big Ollie Angerstein, who's a crowd favourite. That it's like watching a version of Shaq playing. I was going to say Aussie Shaq, but Ollie's actually German, but now he's a permanent resident in Australia, living in Tasmania. So a great basketball story there. But he rocks the rim as like no one I've seen in real life. So we're excited. We think we'll have very exciting teams and we'll be competitive, and we're looking to have a big impact on the league this year.
Yeah, how is the talk of a women's JackJumpers team sort of helped with that sort of Chargers women's team recruiting aspect? Are people excited about it? Are people talking about it?
Yeah, there's certainly been excitement and talk, and it's been something that we had the Islanders, and a lot of people talk about the Devils dropping out of the NBL in 1996, but the Islanders dropped out of the WNBL in 1996, and there isn't as much talk about the impact of losing the women's team. And they were actually national champions in the WNBL only a couple of years before that. So, quite incredible that we were missing those teams. So, I love the fact as well that it'd be, from what I'm hearing, it would be branded JackJumpers. I think it's such a strong brand and very important for our young female athletes to have that aspiration. And we feel that we can be sitting there in the middle between association level basketball and playing potentially for the state, or coming on tours with groups like Swisher, to then be able to play for the NBL 1 team, whether it's here or whether it's up in the northern part of the state, and then have aspirations to play in the Women's National League as well. So we're fully supportive of that. We're hopeful that's going to happen. and it's I think it will only benefit our program. And similar to the men's program where we buddy up with the JackJumpers, we'd like to have that same pathway. So there could be some players that hang around and play with the Chargers and the Tornadoes up north, and our fans get to continue to build a relationship with those players 12 months of the year.
Absolutely. If we change direction now, a couple of years back, so I'm based in Perth. I obviously grew up in Tassie. A couple of years back, I was my dad was fixing up the house a bit, and he sent me out to get some tools. So I headed to K&D Warehouse, and I got there, and it was filled with basketball courts. I couldn't find the 10mm socket that he was looking for. So please tell us the story of how Swisher came about. Because the branding looks fantastic, and it's just such a great thing for Tasmania to have. Tell us about the story.
Yeah, it's quite an incredible story, and alongside my co-founders, Anthony Stewart, we were teammates. We were rivals first in the NBL for many years, and then teammates with the Chargers, and David Bartlett. During 2020, it was that COVID time where there wasn't as much to do, and sports shut down, and we were trying to problem solve because we all had kids similar ages, and saying there's no spaces really accessible for kids just to be able to get some shots up. If you didn't have a hoop in the backyard, or it was too cold or wet outside. So our first little project was working with Kingborough Sports Centre, where we got access to one of the old squash courts. We put a hoop up on the wall. We stripped the floors back and put a basketball keyway and a little 3-point line on there, and wrapped the walls with all this cool Swisher branding and LED lights, and then put a ball return machine, so a Dr. Dish machine. So the thinking was you could open that squash court, go in, put some music on, the machine's doing the work for you, and just get some reps up for half an hour, get up 500 shots. And then the thinking was we had one squash court in Kingston, let's try and expand that. So we then went to Warrane, there was a squash court there, and our model was going to be just keep replicating that around the state and ideally around the country. And then the University of Tasmania had the K&D site that you mentioned, Jared, and just with COVID and the impact that had on a number of different sectors, including universities, the plans to redevelop that site were on hold. So some conversations that we were having with the university led to, well, if you have this little Swisher shop lab, which is what we're calling it, could you potentially activate something in the city? It'd be good to, central spot. It's a huge big warehouse. So we said, yeah, let's do that. And then the thinking was, as we walked through the building, we said, well, you could actually put a half court down here and a couple of shot labs there. And then we thought, well, perhaps you could even put a full court down here. And it ended up being 3 full courts. We've got 11 rings in there now. It's just absolutely packed. If you're there at 6:30 in the morning, you're too late to get on a court. It's amazing. Wow. Just the way it's been transforming the way people can train. So a lot of kids come in before school, particularly we have St Mary's, St Virgil's, Guildford Young, Elizabeth College, within a 5-minute walking distance. So a lot of those students probably get their parents to drop them in super early, and then get an hour on the court, have a quick dust off, and then off to class. And then same sort of thing from 3 in the afternoon right through to 11 p.m. The place is packed, and we have clubs training there. We run our own programs, and we've been taking teams away to interstate tournaments. We took 16 teams over there to Melbourne in January, and it was just incredible. They're all wearing our purple and black, and we're going back to Melbourne to Nuttawading in the King's birthday long weekend. We've got some overseas tours in the pipeline as well. So, yeah, from that little squash court project, it's become huge, and we're extremely proud of that. We're very humbled by the way people have embraced it, and it's become a real community that we just love being a part of.
Yeah, for sure. It's so cool. I remember parking in the car park and just thinking, this is an awesome facility cool. Now. I still don't know where to get a shifter from, but we still get people facility. Coming in. Mitre 10's actually built a new store down in Patrick Street, not too far away, but we still get people come in with a really confused look on their face, saying this is a lot different than last time I was here. And but look, it's an iconic place, and everyone referred to it as K&D, but now the people are saying, I'm going to Swisher. So it's become quite iconic in Hobart, and we're expanding up into northern Tasmania. We've got some great things happening there.
we've got a very strong partnership with the university, and really exciting just to keep building. And there are some pretty cool places in Perth. I go there a lot. My wife's from Perth, so we spend a couple of times a year. And I saw there's a place pretty similar around Coburn, I think, or Hamilton Hill. So there's a bit of a Swisher similar place that's just popped up. And I think they've only opened in the last couple of weeks, which is awesome.
Right. Plenty of squash courts around Perth that aren't getting used.
Plenty of squash courts. And it's still part of our planning that, the building that we're currently in is going to be sold at some point in time. So our model will change. We might go back more to working and delivering programs out of school gyms, but we still have a couple of other projects that we're exploring, and we're really excited about our future over the next 5 to 10 years.
So is you mentioned that the understanding it was the K&D site was always potentially like a temporary sort of thing while the university figured out. Has there been any? Are you looking to sort of have a facility like that at all times, branched with the squash court model, or are you looking to change direction altogether?
Yeah, it has been a temporary venue. We thought initially it was somewhere between 3 to 5 years, and there was some talk that could have extended out, but we think it's most likely going to finish up around middle of next year, and but that still could change, and we're working closely with the university. So the ideal would be is if we had a tin shed somewhere that we could put a couple of courts in would be ideal, but the reality of achieving that in the next 12 months is going to be pretty tough. So we're exploring options, whether it's something that we could look at potentially building or refitting a warehouse somewhere, but the costs can be quite astronomical. But we have 3 full courts that essentially, if we can find the right site, we could lay those down within a matter of months and be up and running. And what we've learned through that is you don't need to build $40-50 million stadiums for people to come and participate. We certainly need that for competition basketball, and there'll always be a need, but we certainly think that there's a model that can provide access to courts in a much more cost-effective way, which also means that the cost for the users is lower. So the majority of our access is very low cost, like our monthly memberships. We do have more premium programs like our academies for those young people that want to be involved with high-level training. But essentially our mission and a big part of our purpose is providing opportunities at a low cost for people to be able to access courts.
Absolutely. I've got my eye on Amart in Glenorchy. I reckon that could be the next Swisher.
It'd be a very cool site. We every time, and before it became the Amart brand, I think it was sitting vacant for a little while. And we're like, well, that could be a good one. But when they're held by commercial organisations, they're looking for a commercial rent, and there's a fair bit of risk with something like that. I often wonder how businesses like us on the mainland are paying, astronomical figures just to rent and turn the lights on. Yep. So for us, anything we do, it needs to be sustainable. And we are looking at a number of models. We're talking with councils, local government. So we're very optimistic about the future. It's just at this stage, we're not exactly certain what that'll look like. And no doubt will continue to evolve. We've been a very adaptable startup business over the last 4 years. So if an opportunity arises, we can act very quickly. Whereas some bigger, more bureaucratic organisations, it takes longer to make those decisions because there's a lot more people involved and potential implications there.
And with the latest, I think it was Basketball Tasmania coming out and saying that there's 31 courts too few in Tasmania, you think hopefully that you'd get a bit of assistance to carry on and branch out and keep developing these facilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, go on.
Yeah,
go on. Sorry.
So certainly there's a definite need there, and we're having a lot of conversations, including conversations with government and sharing, our vision, and we're certainly supportive of basketball having access to the higher end facilities, and we need more in Tasmania particularly after travelling away, whether it's through the uni basketball we're involved with or with Swisher Tours, we see that we are, I say we're 2 generations behind, so sort of 50 years behind the rest of the country when it comes to indoor sport facilities as a whole. We have some good ones. We just don't have enough.
Absolutely. Mark, that's our time for the day. Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. Before we go, is there anything you want to plug while you're here?
Look, Jared, really appreciate the opportunity to chat. I think, as we said in the intro, such rich history of basketball in Tasmania. The sport's given me a whole lot of joy over the last sort of 3 and a bit decades. So, it's awesome. I love talking about it. You mentioned I do some commentary with ABC Radio. I love getting on there and calling the NBL games. So the sport keeps giving me so many different avenues to be involved, and hopefully then part of what I can do, and with David and Anthony at Swisher, we're looking at how we can create opportunities for the next generations coming through.
Absolutely, you're doing some amazing work. I guess I will say if you are listening, get your bum to a Chargers game or 3 this year. Support the mighty Rhinos. And Mark, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for everything you do in the community. Remember, check out the Basketball Fix for everything happening in the NBL. We've got a new free agency tracker, keeping tabs on all the moves in the NBL at the moment. And check out the new Instagram and Facebook pages for the Tasmanian Takeover. You can find them at Tasmanian Takeover. Thank you very much, Mark. And to all the listeners, march on, JackJumpers.
Doyle makes it work from the free throw line.